The Key West sounds really good right about now.
Yeah, that's the truth. So, all right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get rolling here and honor everybody's time. And I think we got a couple more trickling in. Thanks again for being here. This will be the wrap up of it. And as many of you guys have seen, especially from the umpire registry, Tom Rawlings and Little League, they're going to go ahead and start to do these Zoom calls too, which is great. And I don't want to have to compete with them in any stretch of the imagination. I know everybody's time's precious to them. And rather than have two things for everybody to go to, I'd rather it just be one. And we've essentially accomplished a lot here over the last couple of months anyway. So, and he's going to hit. And that's kind of why some of the topics, especially on the two-man system, we haven't touched base with, simply because that's what his focus will be on that stuff too. So he'll be doing that through Tuesdays in October. I think there's 3 dates in October, and those are on Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. Eastern. And if I'm wrong, I'll make sure that I send something out that corrects that. But that's what's out there for you. And like I said, I don't want to compete with it. And as I mentioned, basketball season started for us yesterday. So putting these together now is a little bit more work on top of the more work. So, but nonetheless, here we're starting to get into hoop season. But all righty, today's topic is runner's lane interference, and we'll go ahead and jump right into that here. So let's go ahead and get into it. What I want to do as we talk about interference and runner's lane interference is, number one, define it. And then obviously in the preview clips, I've got all the clips that I want to talk through as well. And as we're watching those, kind of a couple things. Number one, think about what in the play makes it interference. And then the second piece of it too then is let's make sure that we take a look at mechanics and all the auxiliary, like if there's multiple runners, what do we do with them, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. And the first thing that I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I do is, like I mentioned, define what exactly runner's lane interference is. So if we go ahead and take a look at the definition, it's up there for us on the screen right now. And I just want to make sure it's clear, because if anybody is using OBR or any interpretations from OBR, there is a phrase in the OBR that's different than our rules, which is important for us to make sure that we look at. But let's go ahead and take a look at the rule. It's 605J, and it's a batter's out when, as you see here, he runs the last half distance from home plate to first base. So this is either the 45-foot line on the big diamonds, or the 60-foot diamond. It would be the 30-foot line, right? So when he runs in that last half, while the ball is being fielded to first base, the batter runner runs outside to the right of the 3-foot line or to the inside to the left of the foul line, and in the umpire's judgment, interferes with the fielder taking the throw at first base. So this is runner's lane interference. Provided the batter runner, as you say there, can run outside to the right of or to the left of anyone attempting to field a batted ball. Okay, so he can do so to try and avoid a fielder attempting to field a batted ball. Now, the phrase that's missing from our rule compared to OBR is the true throw. So for us, there is no true throw clause in the rule. But what I will say is we want to make sure that the throw is warranted. We're not going to call runner's lane interference on a ball that's absolutely airmailed and goes right down the right field line. Okay, so we want it to be at least a fieldable or a reasonable throw. Now, we don't want to get too particular about it because this is Little League, but we still want to take that idea, that context, and make sure then that throw is at least going to be fieldable by the fielder at first base. Does that make sense?
Yep. Sure.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these examples in action. Again, just to quantify it, remember, this is a runner who runs either to the left of or to the right of the runner's lane. So he's outside the runner's lane and interferes with the fielder's ability to make a catch on the throw. Now, the other thing to also make sure that we know is, just like the batter's box, the lines defining, so the foul line defining and the line defining, those, if he is touching any part of that line, that runner is inside of the running lane. So make sure we take note of that in the approved ruling. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these clips and some of these examples here for us. So here's the first one for us. A little fuzzy, but it'll go ahead and clear up. And as you see, this runner, and the replays will go ahead and show it for us, starts to run to the inside of or to the outside of the running lane. This is generally what happens is these runners will run to the inside of it, okay? Now, the thing that we have to make sure that we understand in watching this one is he has to be completely out of the runner's lane when the interference occurs, okay? And that's exactly what we kind of see right through here. If his foot on that last stride would have been on the line, he would have been considered in the box or in the running lane, and that would have been okay. He'd have been legal here. But as you see here, his right foot right down here, that is completely outside the runner's lane. And because this is a true throw right here, okay, we can go ahead and rule this one to be interference. Now the question becomes, whose call is runner's lane interference?
Plate umpire.
Yeah, plate umpire. And especially in multiple base running situations, we've got to make sure that we still kind of in some way, shape, or form try and hold the line, which is why working point of plate is so important. And starting closer to the plate at point of plate is so important, because then that gives us better vision straight down the line here to do this. Okay. Base umpire is just going to go ahead and make his call like you see here. We just got to make sure that we chest the ball. This is a great mechanic here on this one. He chests the ball so he can get out of the way of any subsequent action from there and then reposition as well. Now, as you see here, a really good diagram for us. He should be running in the yellow lane. He's running in the red. And again, our plate umpire does a great job being on the line here to be able to see this one in a multiple base runner situation. Okay. And right there it is. Okay, we see the true throw. And again, this interrupts the fielder's ability then, as we've already just kind of talked about, to make this throw or to make the catch on this one. Pretty clear look at this one. This one went to replay for them, and obviously interference before touching the base because he's outside the runner's lane. Very clearly and easily called here in this situation. Now, the umpire here, you get a good look at how exactly he's ruling this one. This is in the replay. So right out of the way, the plate umpire went ahead and ruled that this runner would be out, and this is exactly what we do. Right when we have it as the plate umpire, right when we see it at that time, we kill play, and we say that's runner's lane interference, that runner's out. And then any subsequent runners, and this is kind of key about here because this is interference, any subsequent runners have to go to the base that they last legally acquired at the point of interference. So if we would have determined, for example, here that this runner who was R1 to start the play, if we would have determined that he had touched second base right when the interference had occurred, we would be allowed to place him at second base. Again, the awards for any other runners, they go back or they return to the base that was last legally touched at the time of interference, not at the time of the pitch, at the time of the interference. Does that make sense on the subsequent base runner awards? Cool. And again, really good mechanic there by the umpire. Got to come out and sell it, and he does a really good job of that one. All right. Here's an example from earlier in this year. I think about a month ago, Jerry Meals is working the plate. And this is kind of that whole situation I was talking about with plate mechanics when we have different runners. In the first play, this is actually going to be like a forced play at the plate because the bases are loaded here. So we're going to have a play at the plate for the forced play, and then they're going to try and get the batter runner at first base on this one here too. So as the plate umpire, we got to make sure that we are ready for multiple plays, and we've got to make multiple efforts in this situation. And point of plate is our friend in this case here. All right, so here's the ground ball to the third baseman. He's obviously bringing it right here. It's back to the plate. And as you see here, Jerry Meals is in a good spot. He started at point of plate and then shifted on over. And then now he's obviously got vision down the first base line. So he's still got to make his call here then as his eyes then are going to shift down the line. Now let's take a look and see what exactly happens here down the line. Here's our runner. Is he inside the runner's lane?
No.
Not at all. Okay, and as I slow it down here, or try and get a little bit to it to slow down, as he's running, as we see it here, he is completely outside of this one. And remember that last step, that last stride, as long as it's touching the foul line, he would be okay. But here it's completely out of, and then ultimately gets in the way of this one. Now, in Jerry Meals' idea, he thought that this was not a true throw because as you see here, it's on the outside shoulder, so it would have been in the running lane. And in his defense, that's why he went ahead and did not rule this as interference. So that true throw clause kind of threw Jerry Meals off in this call. But nonetheless here in our rule in Little League, is this runner's lane interference, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, this definitely is. He's outside of it, gets in the way of the throw. And as you see there, we have interference. Another little tidbit here, again, chest the ball, you're going to have to pivot. Nice little safe call right there is fine. And if you're the plate umpire, then just make sure that you're selling the interference call. And again, remember all these subsequent base runners, in your judgment, they have to go back to the base that they last legally acquired, that last legally touched at the time of interference, not at the time of the pitch, at the time of the interference. Here's another look at the wide angle here. Good look here at Jerry Meals and what he does. Got to get back on there, multiple efforts, multiple plays. And then as we've talked about here and kind of belabored it, that's definitely in our rule set for sure, runner's lane interference. I'll let it continue to go ahead and roll here as we go through it. All right. If the guy did not want to be called for runner's lane interference, he should have ran to the other side of the base, right? Or into the running lane. which is exactly the graphic that we have right up in here. Any questions so far on runner's lane interference before we start to talk about these next clip as to whether or not they are or are not runner's lane interference?
Stu,
Yeah, go ahead, guys.
I was just looking at the other runners, and to me, it looked like they made the next base before the interference would have occurred. It was close,
Mhm.
but in a setup,
Yeah.
I don't know that we don't have enough eyes to, if bases are loaded, that's going to be a tough one, isn't it?
For sure. And kind of two guiding principles with there, Sam, and great point here. Number one, you want to give yourself the long end of the stick in an argument. So like that's the one major kind of observation here. Give yourself the long end of the stick in the argument. And so common sense prevails there too. But secondly here too, I realize that we do not want to give the offense an advantage because they are guilty for breaking the rule. All right. So even if it's close, I probably err on the side of giving him that base, especially like if our eyes are unsure of it. Like if he's a step, you know, I'm not going to decipher between a step or not, or whether or not he was actually on that base. Again, long end of the stick there. But at the same time, if you know for sure, we do not want to give the offense an advantage for breaking the rule. Okay. So those kind of two guiding principles, and I understand they're competing guiding principles, but I do think that they allow us to objectively apply common sense to the situation. Does that make sense?
Obviously, that's one where you want to get together as a group and try to hash all that out. I'm assuming as well, in the case of regional and World Series, that's reviewable to figure out where the runners are at as well.
You got it. And that's a great point, Greg, because if anybody is working like a regional where you have replay, I would make the call on the field. And then I would just go straight to replay in that situation then and just tell the replay official, like, hey, this is what I called. I need help on where to place the runners.
That's a great point for anybody who hasn't used replay before. Always make the call on the field first.
Yeah.
You can always change it if replay shows that, but you need to have a call on the field first.
Yeah.
You can make your call and you don't have to have a coach come out to question it to go to replay and get the help there.
Yeah. Yeah. You got it. So anything else that's fuzzy or unsure of here as we talk about runners and lane interference before we get into a little participation and debate here as to whether or not these next clips are or are not interference clips?
Yes, Stu. So I don't have a Little League rule book in front of me, but so I don't know if there's an additional rule that would cover this, but the rule that we looked at specifically says batted ball.
Yes.
You know, one of the plays that we often see, especially at the 12-year-old level and up in for Little League, where runner lane interference comes into play is on a drop third strike.
Yes.
So
Adam, to just make sure here, if I were to go back, and I'll bring up that slide here just that we're all looking at the same slide. Here, when we're talking about a batted ball, that's when he's allowed to be out of the runner's lane. So here, any other time, drop third strike like you just said, or batted ball, yes, he's got to run in the runner's lane.
Okay.
Yep. Good point. Good point of clarification there. All right.
Yeah, and Stu, that really can come from anywhere in the field. Theoretically, it could be from the second baseman, and you could still have that call.
Right.
If he did interfere with it.
Correct. Yep. Correct. Good points. All right. Let's go ahead and watch some of these next clips and see how well we've got the runner's lane interference rule down here. And I'll show it and kind of talk through it just because some of it may be a little bit choppier here too. But we want to make sure we can determine whether or not this is or is not runner's lane interference. So here we've got it. Okay, and I'll let the replay continue to go on through here. And of course, multiple runners is always where it's at. Here's a really good look here, and I'll slow it down and give you a frame by frame look as it kind of gets towards the end here. Take a look at his feet. Take a look where his last stride might have been. I'll run that one back because I think that's a really good look at it.
Kind of looks like he was okay until that very last step.
Anybody agree with George?
Yeah, I agree with George. And I think in my mind, that's the reason why there's no ambiguity to this call, is because it takes what you think the intent of the individual is out. Because realistically, his intent probably is to get in the way of that throw, understanding where the pitcher is going to be throwing it from.
Yep. And like you guys said here, all right, there he's good. I think what we say here. But let's take a look at his last stride. Where is it?
Outside.
Yep. And we have a reasonable throw here, right? So what do we have? Do we have runner's lane interference? Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Question, Stu.
Yeah, go ahead.
When he's doing that, he's going to be landing on that base with his right foot. Are we going to give him any ability to make that adjustment as he goes into the base to get the right foot on the bag?
Great, Rich. So there is in Major League Rulebook that what you just said, they have some guidance for that one too, where he is allowed at the last part of it a step or a stride to get back into to reach the base. But essentially what they're talking about in that case is that if they would have had to avoid the fielder in some way, shape, or form, or they found themselves too far out or whatever, we give them a half step essentially to correct it based upon the path that they've taken. Now here, we are not giving that because this is his last stride and he interferes with the throw right through here. So to answer your question here, Rich, the answer is no, we're not necessarily going to give him, because this touch right here obviously would probably be on the line that as he touches the base. We're not giving him that opportunity. So he is allowed to come back into fair territory and get it. But again, that last step, remember the difference here that I'm trying to get to, and I've kind of talked around this not all that well. If he would have been in the runner's lane here and then stepped to reach the base, he'd have been fine. That's what Rich is talking about. But because his last stride is in fair territory and then he steps on the base, that's what makes runner's lane interference. I'll repeat that. If this left foot stride would have been in play or even on the line, we would give him then the step to be able to reach to the base because obviously the base is in fair territory. But because that last stride or that last step is in fair territory, he's taken that grace out. Does that make sense, Rich?
Yes, perfect
Okay.
sense.
Good. All right. I kind of stumbled around that one, so I appreciate that time. The other thing, too, that I want to point out here is the positioning of the first base umpire, especially in a multi-member crew. And a good rule of thumb here, remember that we always want to get our 90-degree angle. So if you think about it, this throw, as we kind of remember here, comes obviously from right here, from that what we call the angle distance box. And if you think about the angle distance box, that's that area from the 45-foot line to the mound, and then, you know, obviously the same over here. Anytime you get something in that area like this ball is, our 90-degree angle will be somewhere in the vicinity of the baseline between first and second base. So again, what we've got to do, and this is a mechanic that we definitely harp on when we get to the regional, is that we want to make sure that we're right about where this umpire is. That right angle is right where he's at. So remember, we don't want to try and take this play from like a traditional A. We want to make sure we get that 90-degree, and right there it is. And that's kind of somewhere near the baseline between first and second. And that's anything fielded on that angle distance box.
Yep.
Good mechanic there. Continue to let it play
Yeah,
here. Go ahead, Sam.
That's just working the wedge.
Yep. Yeah, and again,
That's some quiet stuff.
yeah,
That's
and
some quiet stuff.
yep. And again, to Rich's point here, if this last stride would have been in the runner's lane, we would allow him then to obviously come into fair territory to be able to touch the base. But because then his last stride is outside the runner's lane, that kind of all his protection there is off. And this is very clearly runner's lane interference for us. Go ahead. Cool. Yeah, and then just show replay after replay here. So a really good look at that one, and it's making sure that we get the explanation from, like Rich said, about that last step or stride. I think the next two examples that are getting ready to come up will be Little League examples for us. And obviously things happen a little bit faster here in Little League baseball. Kevin, are you still on the call?
Yeah, right here.
All right, cool. I just couldn't tell because I'm sharing my screen. So Kevin Southall's our plate umpire here in the 2018 regional. So here we have one in that angle distance box. Okay, fielded right here. And Jeff, is that you as the first base umpire? I think that's Jeff Shuttle. Yep. Again, great mechanic here by Jeff here too. That is that angle distance box. So his right angle obviously is going to be somewhere in the vicinity of that baseline. So both umpires have done a really good job here. Number one, of clearing the catcher and making sure that we've got vision up here. Now let's take a look here because we want to determine whether or not this is runner's lane interference. Slowing it down here so we see his strides, this runner's strides. What do we think here?
Absolutely.
Kevin, you
So-
tell me, because you had the call here. Kevin, walk me through what you had here.
Yeah, so I remember this one pretty well. At the time of the play, everything's happening real fast. My first thoughts were I was nervous about a collision somewhere with the catcher, the pitcher, and the runner. So I'm focused on that. Completely missed the runner's lane interference. Didn't even know about it till we talked about it after the game in the post game.
Yep. And basically here, Kevin, for you, what makes you come to that realization that you definitely should have called runner's lane interference here?
Oh, he's absolutely. He was never in the runner's lane. He was outside the runner's lane the whole time. The throw was coming from behind him. It was pretty clear cut.
Yep. You got it. And again, remember, this is a reasonable throw, and there's no guidance for us in our rule book about what qualifies a reasonable throw. So that clause is out. Remember, that's only for OBR. But just for context, and again, taking the long end of the stick in an argument, we want to make sure that that throw is at least somewhere on target, and at least somewhat catchable here. Now, another kind of major point here as to why exactly we want to use the angle distance box. Think about how easy it is for Jeff to get out of the way and reposition here if he uses this mechanic. If he doesn't use this mechanic and he decides to take this play like right in here where my cursor is, he's right in the middle of all kinds of stuff, right? Because that runner's going to overrun the base and maybe he might try and go that way. So again, this is not only the appropriate position for the first base umpire here because it's that 90-degree angle, but at the same time, it also sets us up to reposition for the play after the play without being in the way. Good job there altogether. If this ball goes out of play here, whose call is that?
Kevin's.
Yes. Yep. Which is why we hold the line, which is right where Kevin was. And that's a play he would have. All right. Good work.
Yeah, this was real good to see afterwards because you start to reevaluate some of your mechanics and start rethinking things like you've got to do a better job getting quicker to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and especially on a 60-foot field. I mean, this is tough.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was lightning fast in real time, but you don't realize it. That was the interesting part about it. Not a word.
Yeah.
From anyone until after the game was like, wow, yeah, okay, there it was.
Speaking of lightning fast, this kid from Michigan in this World Series clip right now, he was lightning fast. He was at the regional that year too, and I mean, he would do this all the time. So again, we have a ball in the angle distance box. All right, and our first base umpire here, I don't know if you guys can see his initial starting position, probably a little deep because he's, and he doesn't necessarily get all the way there because he started too deep. So that's why we kind of want to shorten up a little bit. But let's take a look here and determine whether or not we have runner's lane interference here. So I'll go ahead and let it play. Kind of take a look at this runner here. Continue to take a look at his steps. Last stride is right there. And then we have that play there.
If that last stride is on the chalk, that's a no.
Yeah,
Anybody agree with Jeff?
yeah,
I
he's technically in.
So, yep.
Yeah,
He's on
great
the-
point.
Really the perfect run by him.
Yes. Yep. Great point, Jeff. Great pickup by everybody else. Absolutely. Here we are. Now he's definitely outside the runner's lane the entire way, right? I mean, he's friggin' in the grass. But again,
Yep.
that last stride, boom, he's right on the line. And remember, the approved ruling is the line does constitute him as being in the runner's lane. So therefore, we do not have runner's lane interference on this call.
This is actually the opposite of that major league example you had a second ago where he was
Yep.
in the lane the entire way and that last step was out of the lane.
Yep. You got it. So yeah, right there is barely on it, but that constitutes him in the box, and therefore we do not have runner's lane interference here on this one.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to kind of stress is the rule is where are they at the time of the interference occurred or didn't occur. It doesn't say he has to be in the lane the entire time.
Right.
So if the ball hits him right there in that position, he's not established himself in the box yet, that would be interference.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. And again, take the long end of the stick in that argument. It's got to be a reasonable throw to retire the runner. And even though we don't have that clause necessarily in our rule book, again, that's just good officiating because that's common sense, right? We want to make sure that we're taking that long end of the stick.
So it's kind of the same principle as a catcher coming up the line without the ball in his possession. It's not obstruction until they get there.
Yeah.
The runner can be coming down the line. He cannot have the ball on the line. But if he gets out of the way before the runner's there, you got nothing.
Right. Right. Yep. And I've got nothing on this play too. And it's real important then, even as the plate umpire here, obviously, to make sure that we don't give up on the play too, right? Because this, I mean, we're talking about his last stride is the one that we have to watch. And that's exactly what we want to watch. So, when you're teaching younger officials or newer officials to start to work, like when we start to explain why we get on and up the line and trail the batter runner, we're not there to help the base umpire in case he needs like a pulled foot or something like that. Now, obviously we can give that information, provide that information if necessary, but our primary responsibility is fair foul, catch, no catch, and then runner's lane interference. And then if the base umpire needs assistance, remember that's his call, right? At first base relative to pulled foot or safe out, he would have to come to us for that. But runner's lane interference, catch, no catch, and then fair foul. Those are our top priorities, and that's why we've got to be mobile and getting on the line here out of the batter's box. All right.
Hey, Stu, quick question for you on that. Should the plate umpire, after the fact, whether the ball hits the runner, assuming that it's this play here where you don't feel there's runner lane interference, does it make sense for the plate umpire to give a safe signal to show that he saw it and that's how he's ruling it?
Great question, Tony. What I would probably say here is no, because what you're going to end up with then is 2 calls on this play, and that's not what we want.
Okay.
So, like if you see here, like this base umpire is obviously going to rule safe,
Right.
and then that safe call there will be interpreted as that we did not have interference in that case. And obviously the runner's lane interference is not going to be the base umpire's call in that case either. So yeah, the only time that we're going to have a mechanic by the plate umpire is when we're calling the interference, and that's time. That's
Okay.
interference. He's out. Yep. Great question. All righty. What else, guys? Anything else? Any other questions, points that I may not have touched on?
Frequently, you'll have, particularly in Little League, you'll have a kid that is not in the lane. Say the catcher picks up the ball. He sees the runner's not in the lane, and he fails to make any kind of throw whatsoever. Coach is going to come out and say, well, of course he couldn't make a throw. The kid was in his way. He doesn't want to hit him.
Right.
Think, like, you need to have a throw, because the rule isn't it prevents the catcher from making a throw. It prevents the fielder covering the bag from making the catch.
Yep. That's a great point. He has to make the throw. You are correct. Yep. Good point. What else? Anything else that I may not have I may have missed or anything else to highlight there?
Good.
Okay. Well, guys, thanks again for being here. A great end to the session, I think, and I really have enjoyed the opportunity to be able to talk with you guys and see you guys every week. And as I mentioned here, we're kind of passed the baton on to Tom Rawlings, and on Tuesdays in October, I think starting next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, through the umpire registry, he'll have Zoom calls, and that'll be a little bit more basic type stuff, not as granular or specific as ours. And again, I did that intentionally just because I knew that he was going to end up starting to take a lot of those things too, and I didn't want to cover the same stuff he would. And at the same time, I don't want to have him or me competing for your time. So on Tuesdays here, if you've enjoyed the Zoom calls, I know Tom is probably going to end up recording those too for you guys to use as well. But they're definitely more back to the basics, which is a really good thing, especially for those of us who are going to have to be instructing new umpires here, or returning umpires in the future. So it'd be really worth our while here to take a look at those. And those are coming up, I think 3 Tuesdays in October, and then we'll probably pick back up at some point with 3 Up, 3 Down as well. But appreciate you guys throughout the course.
Hey, one more question just came to my head there, Stu.
Go ahead, Jeff.
All the examples we saw today were safe calls by U1 that got overturned in the case of RLI to an out. Is there a case where we can call runner's lane interference on an out call?
So the answer would be yes, because remember that the interference would have occurred before the out would have been made. Does that make sense? Because the interference
Right.
essentially then
Right.
it would happen as that fielder is receiving the throw. So
Well,
technically,
correct, but
right there.
as instantaneous as all that is, U1's going to come up with an out, and you're going to tack on runner's lane interference. And I think the only result of that would be placement of runners.
Correct. And
Okay.
Yep, that's exactly right. Placement of runners. So, and just remember, if you've got RLI and it's dead at that point, so runners then they go back to the base that they would have last acquired at the time of the interference.
Yep.
So. All righty, guys. Well, I'll hold on for a few minutes here. I think we got about 5 minutes left for any questions or any conversations thereafter, but you guys are free to go. Thanks again for being here, and we'll be in touch here soon. So I'll hang on with any questions and chat here with anybody for a few more minutes. But other than that, have a good one, guys. Have a great weekend, and we'll see everybody soon.